Hi again. Good morning. Good morning. Hello. Hello, Martin. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah. Good to see you. Right, you know where you're sitting? Good. Don't go. We're going to move on swiftly. This is not a coffee break. So if you move out and want to get a coffee, bring it back in here so we can keep you entertained and informed while you drink your coffee. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to keep up this rather brutal pace because we've got a lot to get through between now and 1 o'clock, and then there'll be the announcements, and we'll finish by 1:45. Let's move on to the second building block about AI and digital transformation in the asset management industry. Let's go to Ahmed Kordi, Head of Investment Research and Decision Support at PIF. How are you viewing this massive challenge? And I'm going to come to you in a moment because I'm going to introduce everybody else because we've got Ramani, who is Global Lead at Data and AI for Accenture. Martin Syms, who's just come in from Singapore, International Head of Aladdin Engineering for BlackRock, and Aman Tind, who is Global Chief Architect for State Street. So you've got the feeling of how we're running this with open discussion if possible, but I'd like you to pick up and make your points as sharply as you can because of the pressure we are under on time. So Ahmed, first to you about how you see this developing on AI and the digital transformation. Are you almost overwhelmed by it?
Well, we can see the adoption of AI is evolving every day and picking up across the industry. If we look at the major challenges or obstacles when it comes to AI adoptions, I would say there are four main obstacles. First is the black box phenomena, if I may say, which is getting investment professionals to really believe in the output of AI models.
Now, are you having trouble on that? Getting people to understand
I think it is a challenge across the industry. It's not just particular to PIF, but getting people to believe in the output of AI models is a challenge. Today, if you just we put so much data into these models, and it comes up with certain recommendations. For people to really believe in that output is a struggle, and we take a number of measures to overcome that obstacle, which is first of all, we do some back testing to make sure that historically these models are robust. That's one. Another is on data quality. We ensure that data going into those models have the right governance, the right quality checks, etc. And finally, we use also Shapley values to to better understand the output. You need to see what factors played into the explainability of that model. So, for example, if you are forecasting a return, you can see that factor X, Y, Z contributed the most to that output. So that increases the adoption of and a belief in those models, and that's the first challenge. Another challenge is the scarcity of talent. So anyone who has tried to employ or deploy data scientists will appreciate how difficult it is to employ such a team. That's the second challenge. The third is the regulatory landscape. It's a very fast evolving landscape, whether in data sovereignty, whether it's on data governance and security, data security. Data security, these three factors are ever evolving, and investment firms need to keep up with such developments. And finally are the budgetary constraints. Although it's becoming more affordable, it's still a big CapEx resource intensive, whether on the infra side or on the personnel side. And we need the alignment of management up to probably the board level to invest in such technologies.
Now, Ahmed, you sent me a note, and part of the note said, it's a conservative industry and adoption of new technology will take an optimistic but cautious approach. Are you suggesting that actually many at the moment are rather intimidated by what AI is and are still trying to get their brains around it?
Yeah, I think the big factor is the black box, because even if you invest so much and you do a lot of work on it, as long as investment professionals have some doubt into the output of those models, that's the main challenge. And that's the black box phenomena that I was referring to.
But what about the issue of comprehension, of understanding what the black box is and what it represents?
Yeah, that's where the Shapley values, the back testing, ensuring the data governance and data quality controls. These three factors that I mentioned are what makes adoption stronger, and that's a challenge, and will continue to be a challenge. And yeah.
I think data is going to underpin the whole discussion in the next half hour. So, Senthil, let me ask you to pick up on some of the points that Ahmed has raised, particularly the transformation, the speed of transformation, how you're seeing it at Accenture. Are you seeing a level of intimidation, problems with the black box?
Well, Nick, the way I see it is, especially with the advent of Gen AI right now, we've done a little over 1,500 engagements. And it's interesting because I share a degree of optimism with you today. And the reason I say this is when you have scaled AI in place, we're starting to see a uplift of really 300 basis points, in mature AI implementations, right? Especially across the asset classes and professionals and portfolio managers and so on. But that has to be done correctly. And the reason you do that is in the two important areas that AI can really impact, all of this. Number one is AI is able to give you non-linear relationships. And that's a critical aspect because the most ideas is typical quant gives you linear relationships. AI can give you non-linear relationships. The second important thing is identifying newer opportunities that are out there. My sense is that the folks who are getting this right, and I call this the anatomy of success around 4 key areas, Nick. And the first area is really what I call is change delta. When you do a change with AI, it has to be worth the change, meaning that you have to get through the process and reinvent the process completely. There's no point just putting an algorithm in there if the process is not fundamentally going to change. It has to be worth the change, which is what we call the change delta. The second aspect is really data. We talked about data significantly. 83% of what we do is unstructured data in this business. 83%. It's a significant percentage. And that percentage is actually going up with unstructured data significantly right now because of the need, and not only the need, but also the fact that with Gen AI, you can pull in a lot more data, at this point in time. The third aspect is you can do a lot of what I call digital twinning. Digital twinning is about using synthetic, bonds or synthetic ways in which you can actually see the performance of a particular asset class or a portfolio that you can do as well. And the last point I want to leave you with, besides responsible AI, and I'm sure we're going to get back to responsible AI here, in the next 20 minutes, is really talent. For every dollar that you employ in an AI program, we see that $7 need to be employed on talent, which is the process change, the training, and so on. So
I was going to ask you about that, but tell us more about that because that's a significant figure.
It is.
$1 to $7.
That's the reason why it should not just be looked at as putting a bunch of algorithms and technology in there. It has to be seen as what is the people change, whether the change delta is actually worth it, reinventing the process and the underlying technology to be doing that. And the last thing is continuous learning. I mean, I just, I live in San Francisco. Every week I come out, I see 5 more new models created. There are 2,200 foundation models today. The question is, how do you choose? And choice is actually great, but the choice can also slow you down at the same time. The question is the constant learning needs to happen. So we see the anatomy of success of organizations who've done this, which is the 300 basis points I told you, are employing those $7 for learning and change.
But what about a desperate shortage of engineers, of people who can help Ahmed and big organizations tackle this? How significant do you think that is? You have the AI, the technology, and the science, but actually don't necessarily yet have the engineers to handle it.
Totally agree. Nick, and I think that's the transformation I'm starting to see is how investment professionals are becoming investment engineers. And I'm saying that deliberately as an engineers because you start to use these models today, and the interesting part is that the low-code, no-code effect with which you can start to build these models can make any engineer successful, and it democratizes the entire field. I'm actually going to give you a completely different example here. Let me move away from investment banking, and I'll go to life sciences for a minute. So we work with a very large client in the US where we did clinical trials. Clinical trials are $1.5 trillion that they typically spend. It takes 10 years to 15 years to get approvals for these drugs and so on and so forth. Very similar to the way we deal with investment banking. But it's interesting because the client actually did this. They went to the top performers in the clinical trials. They codified what they were doing with Gen AI. They passed it on to the lower performing clinical trials, and they started to see a median performance within a few months. So you can do things like this that you could never do in the past, around the talent profile as well.
Martin, let's move on to you because you're managing director and the international head of BlackRock's Aladdin Engineering Group. You've been with them for 25 years. We heard what Larry was saying a couple of days ago about the challenge and the almost the threat of AI, but also what needs to be embraced. What's your reflection, particularly on data, what we heard from Ahmed?
I think it's a great point that Larry raised. You know, when we think about data and we think about all of the prerequisites to really take an advance of data, you're looking at sort of capital investment in the whole value chain, from data centers to power to utility. All of those things have to come together, firstly, just to create the environment. It's no getting away from the fact that you do need to invest in a platform like Aladdin perhaps, where all of your data could come together. And I think you raised an important point. The techniques we've used with structured data just don't, frankly, work with unstructured data. So you need a new way of thinking about data. You have to think about how do you democratize access.
I'm going to interject. What do you mean a new way of thinking about data? Be more specific.
Well, I think traditionally engineers have thought about data, you know, around, you know, in terms of engineering and engineering stance. And I think the reality is now we need to turn it to walk really in the shoes of the user and really think about their access. The friction and access through tools like Gen AI, such as I agree your point that we're seeing investors now that are essentially investor engineers. So having a great data platform is key. Data is your greatest access. But then secondly, I think having you know, the talent that can not only take an idea from a prototype and turn it into really a productionable outcome. What I see, I spent some time in the summer talking to sort of C-suite across Europe, some 70 plus, and all of them said, we see great ideas, great experiments, but actually how do I turn that into a product that I have confidence in and that our regulators have confidence in? And so that investment from idea into essentially production standard is an area where I think firms really need to focus.
Aman, I want your view on this, but just picking up on Ahmed and what he said about the black box. Is my interpretation, Martin, correct of what you've just said, that there's a rather cavalier attitude to data compared now to the discipline that AI is going to demand?
Well, I wouldn't say cavalier, but what I would say is it's exciting, right? It feels like we're at the top of the hype cycle. Everybody's talking about it. The ability to take data, build new proxies, you know, from other data sets, social settings, things like that. So it's really exciting. But I think there's a real threshold that you do have to pass in order to turn it into production quality. Look, AI has been around for many, many years. Certainly at BlackRock, you know, we've been doing AI for 15 years. So the way that you govern AI, I think, remains the same. I think Gen AI just presents a tool set with some particular challenges, being non-deterministic. So I think that's something that, you know, folks are really sort of grappling with right now.
Aman, pick up as Chief Technology Officer at State Street what you've heard from the other three panelists and build it forward.
So I completely agree with, for example, what Ahmed said about the black box. But the thing is, what we need to understand is the human mind is a black box. What I'm going to do today, what I'm going to say today, we've got the State Street executives over here in the audience. They have no idea what I'm going to say. Similarly, when you actually ask a question to a large language model, you actually have no idea what you're going to say. It is actually much more predictable because you know it is going to respond based on all the training that you've told it. It's based on the context that you've just attuned it to. So what we need to do is we need to embrace the unpredictability of it because that's where the most value is going to come from. And that is from the fact that it has emergent behavior. So what that means is that so far we are thinking about it the way we think about machine learning because we tell machine learning model what to do, it goes out and does that. Here, we are actually afraid of it because we are telling it to do something and it may do something completely different. But that is what its power is. What we need to do is embrace it, and that is going to change everything. When we talk about, for example...
Can I just pick you up, though? Embrace the unpredictability.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Because if it's unpredictable, it's uncomfortable, it's a black box problem.
Yeah.
And how do you embrace something you feel uncomfortable with at a time when you assume that AI is going to solve this problem anyway?
So in this case, what you need to do is the way you embrace it is by putting an appropriate risk framework around it. So for example, at State Street, what we do is we've adopted the same metrics as the EU AI Safety Act, wherein we are looking at every use case and we are looking at what is the risk of it going wrong and what is the overall end-to-end workflow. So for example, even if AI is giving you a response, but you have a human who is then going to make the final judgment based on all the data that is there in front of him, we still need to rely on the humans, but now all this information is available at his fingertips, which he had to be a master of Bloomberg and look at multiple data sources and perhaps wait a month to be able to do sentiment analysis on what people are talking about a certain equity on Twitter. So the embracing nature here is that what we need to do is put an appropriate risk framework, understand what is the data that is going in, understand how the data that is going to come out is going to be used, and then embrace it, look at it, and do what you want to do with it. But success is on the other side of fear.
I'd like all of you to pick up on talent and skill sets and so on, but there's one thing you said in our pre-discussion, which I may not have right, but 90% of the time is spent gathering data. It should only be 10%.
Yeah.
Explain what you mean by that and why that's a big drag on efficiency.
Every single time. So at all the financial institutions, we pay like tens of millions of dollars just to manage data. And it is almost like carrying a huge basket of oranges where you don't even own a juicer. So you keep peeling them one by one and trying to make sense out of it. Gen AI is the biggest juicer that you have, where you can throw the entire basket and just sit and enjoy the juice. When we talk about this in terms of your ability to be able to process information, what you need to do is first gather all that information, and Gen AI with AI agents, now every single data provider is going to come up with their own AI agent, and you can have an Uber framework which simply requests them everything that you want. Anthropic just released computer use, wherein you can just tell it what you want to do, and it actually opens up a web browser, and it searches for everything that you need, and then gets you all the information. Now, if you needed to make investment decisions on a monthly basis, 3 weeks is actually around the time that it takes to gather the data, and then you sit on it, look at it for a week to be able to make a decision. Now you can get all of that information on the same day, and now you can choose whether you want to sit 3 weeks and make a decision, or make the decision in 3 days and actually completely expand the amount of asset classes that you hold or the speed at which you execute, which is going to be the absolute game changer.
All of you jump in if you want to, but Ahmed, I saw you nodding.
Yes. Well, data is the foundation of any meaningful decision making. And to make the right decisions, you need accurate data. Data need to be reconciled, need to be transformed, and put into a data warehouse for the consumption of those AI models. To put things more into context, the magnitude of data is what it makes it even more challenging. So in our case, for example, in our department, we deal with 80 plus portfolios run by 36 managers. We have between investment book of records, accounting book of records, risk data, trading data, etc., more than 30 million rows of data. And that data set is growing every day. So this presents a real challenge. And when we talk about data, accuracy is of paramount importance. And you cannot rely on manual processes to synthesize the data and cleanse it. So what we actually do is that we deploy autonomous programs or bots. We have 30 of those checks running at multiple instances during a single day to make sure the right flags are raised at the right time for data accuracy for our investment operations team and our IT teams to really make sure that we have accurate data for the consumption of our AI and machine learning models.
Martin.
No, I was just going to, I agree with you and add that, data is no longer a technology outcome, it's a business outcome. And I think about some of the challenges in our industry. You think about private markets getting to the breadth, the depth, and just having confidence around the quality. Look, there's really no substitute for partnership. When you think internal firms, when they're trying to build data sets and they're trying to bring these things together, it's long, it's tedious, it can be arduous, but there are some accelerants. So some of those key partnerships, particularly in the private markets, I think is important to just embrace. I think the other point around embracing AI is, clearly there's a ton of opportunity in the investor space, but there's oodles of opportunity just in terms of day-to-day stuff that we can do. If you imagine an IMA, just being able to take an IMA and translate that into compliance coding, or if you imagine, preliminary fund manager commentaries, all of those things add up to moments that allow an investment professional to focus on generating alpha. So it's not just about taking advantage of the data sets and creating unique insights. That's part of the puzzle, but a big part of it is just removing the mundane, the boring, and just helping those investment professionals to really focus on the stuff that really matters.
Sen, you were nodding. I'm I'd like to ask you as well about risk and resilience and the definition of risk and how risk is having to be redefined.
Absolutely. I mean, just back on that previous point, I think there are 3 C's that are important we see with most of our clients that are trying to achieve in AI excellence is cost, carbon, and compute, and an ability to actually own and make sure that they just don't look at tokenomics. Because one of the things that's happening, Nick, with Gen AI and with AI is there's a lot of over-indexing that's happening on tokenomics and tokens and prompt costs and so on. But what people are forgetting is the data economics are actually going up. The cost of data is actually going up. The maintenance of data is actually going up. Back to what Aman was saying as well, because you have to manage this data, significantly as well. Now, on the risk and the resilience side, there are 7 key principles on responsible AI. We've seen the Saudi government has actually implemented it. In fact, Ahmed and his team are significantly focused on that as well. It's a key thing for the life cycle for any asset manager, key life cycle for any AI product that you actually build, are these 7 key principles. But what is important fundamentally is explainability. We talked about black box quite a bit, right? When you talk about explainability, the degrees of explainability significantly change based on what you're trying to solve for. Are you just trying to do research? Are you trying to maximize your portfolio? Whatever you're trying to do, explainability changes fundamentally. So we partnered with Stanford 2 years back with the HAI, and we built together the explainability framework in which there are 4 key principles. And we've taken these principles to every client of ours to get this implemented as part of it. And one of the key observations that we're starting to see is that over 36% of these clients, right, did not have even the fundamental framework back to, what I think we were discussing on the controls that you need to have in place to be able to do that at this point in time. So there's significant work ahead, Nick, in the industry to achieve, risk and resilience.
Is that a cultural issue to understand the primary nature and threat and challenge from not addressing risk and resilience in a decisive 4-dimensional way?
Absolutely, and that's why I think any AI program kind of starts with mindset, and coupled with mindset is courage. And the reason I say that, and those are just not 2 English words I'm throwing out, the reason I'm saying that is we go back to looking at the anatomy of what happens fundamentally. If you take the algorithms out, the data out, everything out, the talent out, etc., if the mindset can change and the courage can change from the top, we see everything actually following through, if you will, because then the people will get trained and they will want to adopt and use it as well.
Thank you. We've got 8 minutes left. I'd like a big idea from each of you, if I may, which we haven't maybe discussed so far. Ahmed, let me come to you, because one of the things you wanted to emphasize was machine learning and the way PIF looks at that. Have we gone beyond even machine learning in some of the things we've been discussing?
Well, we have, at PIF, we are strong believers in the power of AI and machine learning, and we believe we are at the forefront of that. We have a number of case studies that we have implemented. In particular, I want to touch upon two particular case studies that are dear to my heart. First is the machine learning part, which is used to predict manager performance. So each of the 36 managers we deal with, we feed in the 30 million rows of data we're talking about into the machine learning. And the objective of the carrot that you feed the machine learning with is to the expected return, to maximize expected return, reduce risk. And that's what we do. And we use neural networks, 6 or 7 machine learning models. And the objective here is to forecast each manager's return for the next quarter. The model goes on training every Friday to reduce the error rate, and it's a very iterative process to reduce the risk as we go and as we build up more and more data. We combine that expected return with covariance matrices, and we push it into an optimizer, whether Black Litterman or otherwise, and it comes up with a suggested allocation. The objective ultimately out of this whole exercise is to support a stronger investment decision-making process to enhance risk-adjusted returns. That's one, and I know we're short of time. And the second model that or case study that we are very keen about is a large language model, generative AI, where we have the investment team chat with the data. So if you want to generate a performance review report, it's not about just the chart, it's about the analytics, the insights. You can ask it questions about what manager is the best manager, worst manager, compare X manager to Y manager, etc. So you can really have deep insights generated by natural language processors. So that's something, a case study that we are very keen about, and we're seeing fruitful results from that.
when we talk about machine learning, Aman, again, in your title is alpha. Now, how do you define alpha, the kind of thing which I put on the agenda an hour ago?
So when we are chasing alpha, what we are trying to do is get returns. On the spreadsheet side, what alpha means is it's a front-to-back strategy of doing the best thing for the clients by engaging with them on the front office, middle office, back office, and giving a single unified vision to our clients. That's what we're doing with alpha, and we've created, to Ahmed's point, around data quality, we've created data quality regimes that sit in the middle, that look at every single data domain and ensure that you've got good quality data. And then we've created co-pilots such that you can inquire that data through natural language. Simply ask the question, and it will tell you what is your projected risk-adjusted returns, what is your overall exposure, how can you chart it using low-code, no-code that you were talking about before over multiple months, and how you can reduce it.
Martin?
So when I think about that topic, I think the reality is the front end and the friction you see with technology is going to reduce by the day. I do think that ultimately it's about data. I think that investors want to be able to see their whole portfolio come together, so with specific emphasis on the private markets, and that presents some challenges. And I just think it's a corporate culture. What we're seeing, certainly at BlackRock, we're seeing that engineering is a core skill of all employees. So you remove the friction of accessing data, you remove the friction of expert systems using sort of natural language prompts for visualization. Then what you really need is the talent that can really harness that and take that forward. And lastly, the point around human in the loop. There's no substitute for that right now with the non-deterministic outcomes. So you do need an individual that essentially can understand the bias in the data sets or any other issues and can have the imagination to take those sort of investment theses forward.
Sen?
I think agentic AI is going to be the future. We're probably going to be here in the stage next year to talk about agentic AI and autonomous AI models.
And what will we be saying about what has happened in the past year, which is the 12 months to come?
I think the reasoning capabilities of AI models are increasing by the day. Like I told you about the 2,200 models, and the cognitive capabilities on the AI models, the ability to hold short-term and long-term memory, the ability to plan and act is going to enhance through these agentic AI models. I think this business and this sector is going to start adopting digital twinning far more because of the AI models. And just this one thing, like Martin was saying, I think we're going to move from humans, in the loop to humans on the loop in the future as well. And that's going to happen.
Say that again.
Humans in the loop today, because you need humans to actually feed the model, enable, give it context, etc. And it's going to go towards humans on the loop, which means the agentic models are going to drive everything for you, and you will be informed about what happens as well.
So where does the human come into it?
That's the interesting thing, because the humans then start to move into doing much more value-added activities in terms of portfolio management, as well as maximization of returns and so on. That's what is going to happen, is the productivity is going to transcend completely because of Gen AI, because of agentic AI. What you see today as 43% productivity that you can get in the sector is going to enhance to 76% based on that.
76?
76%.
Okay. Now, I've been intrigued about the use of the word black box, which never came up in our pre-discussion, but Ahmed, you put it on the agenda. Is it possible we could have a transparent box rather than a black box? I'm being provocative here. In other words, a comfort which is you can see inside the box and not just see it as a black box which you don't really understand.
Well, I'm not a super technical person by background, but as far as I understand, that's a very difficult thing to achieve, because the process of let's say if it's a neural network process, it can be a very large iterative process within the neural network to reach the end result, right? And to understand the exact process as far as I am concerned, it's nearly impossible. I don't think there would be, it would be possible to understand exactly how it arrived at this decision.
All right. Well, Aman, what's your answer?
I think it's possible, and it's almost here. And the reason I say that is, for example, now people are talking about new symbolic AI, which is a mix of generative AI plus machine learning, in which, and we talk about agentic AI, wherein if there are small language models which are very, very particular at doing one thing, and they have been tested through comprehensive data sets which have been generated in order to make sure that they've been fully tested and vetted to do that one thing and do that one thing right. Once you start working instead of a large language model that can give you the recipe for a chicken tikka masala and tell you how to optimize your portfolios, instead, once you start working with very specific models that do very specific things and try to do this as a compound system, then you know exactly what it is going to predict for you.
Sen.
I think it's going to be a quest, in my opinion. I'm not sure it's going to be exactly 0 or 1 1. My feeling, at least, is there is going to be and some kind of a between an extremely transparent to an extremely black box. That's kind of, it's going to be a degree.
Martin.
I think I think we're almost there. I think that the risk is not in the LLMs. I think you can benchmark this quite effectively. It comes down to the data that's essentially fueling the model and understanding the biases or its incompleteness. So I'd say yes. I'd say it's.
And all of you, we've got literally 1 minute left. Are we going to be staggered if we're all assembled here in a year's time at the progress and the movement forward?
I think we will. And, but all we need to do is we need to stop saying that we need PhDs and we need data engineers and we need AI engineers. This is a technology that even an illiterate person can use. Even if you can't read and write, just enable the voice mode on ChatGPT and you can do whatever you want. The only thing is you need to have a vision. You need to know what you want to do. And if you know what you want, you can achieve it through this technology.
Martin.
I would say we'll be staggered. We're seeing firms investing in platforms like Aladdin. We're seeing the corporate culture changing. To your point around folks just thinking, about this just being another tool in the box. And I think the potential, is huge. I think we're at the top of the hype cycle. It feels that way. We're only just getting started. Next year, I think we're going to see extraordinary gains.
Sen.
3 words: learning, training, and change management, Nick. That's going to be the biggest 3 we need to focus on.
And are we going to be staggered at the
Absolutely,
rate of
which
advance?
is really why learning, training, and change management is going to be significant.
Ahmed, are you going to be staggered?
Absolutely. I think affordability is increasing. So more and more firms will adopt AI. That's one. And as we see almost every day, new large language models being developed. So I think the pace of progress will only increase.
So should we all book for PIF3 this time next year?
Well, definitely.
All right, and we'll review it.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Thank you. Thank you, Martin.